Thanks for coming. Thank you.
I think we're all here, so we're going to get started.
We've done this before from your perspective. We've been in the audience at a cooking class, and we know the first thing you want to do is start eating and sipping. So we always insist on it. Like, you may not know what you're eating at this point, but we'll catch up fast.
Start eating and start sipping. I'm Ted Lee. I'm the younger of the Lee brothers. And so I tend to start things off because I need to fight to get my voice heard.
That's not true.
And Matt, being the older brother, then will intervene and start cutting my performance down as we proceed. But we generally get along.
Can you all hear him in the back?
Everyone can hear? Great. Some ground rules. Even though we're wearing these cool chef's jackets with the impressive gingham sleeves, we like during our classes for you to pretend that you're in our home. I'm drinking water right now, but I'm probably going to pour myself a glass of wine too. And we want you to feel comfortable here and to be able to ask anything. There are no dumb questions in the cooking class. We had to ask Dave a million questions.
We're totally untrained. We are home cooks.
We're home cooks. So, as you may know, some of you may know that Matt and I grew up in a small town on the coast called Charleston, on in a charming little stretch called Rainbow Row. I see a lot of heads nodding. 83 East Bay, a yellow pastel house between another shade of yellow and a blue pastel house. And a really special place to grow up, Charleston. As kids, we were really surrounded by food. And the key thing is that Matt and I are a little different from most Charlestonians in the sense that we weren't born there, and I'm not sure if that matters as much in Columbia as it does in Charleston. But in Charleston, it really does. Matt and I moved there from New York City. Our parents moved to Charleston in 1979 when I was 9 and Matt was 11, 8 and 10.
Now you're dating us.
Now I've really dated us. What was so amazing to us, from a kid's perspective, you move at that age, there's a lot of cultural comprehension, cultural change you're going through that's just like you can't even fathom. But what was cool to us and seemed exotic and strange was that all our friends at that age already knew how to catch blue crabs and pick them. And they knew how to throw a cast net and reel in shrimp. They knew, some of them, the ones with more adventurous parents, had been given oyster knives and already knew how to shuck an oyster. And to kids who grew up, in New York City, going to the Dates Shopwell for all our ingredients and terrified because, terrified of this was the 70s, pre-Bloomberg New York, pre-Dinkins New York, being scared of being snatched off the street. Charleston was a pretty cool place from our perspective. To most of our peers, it was just, what you do. The whole shrimp and crabbing thing, that was no special thing. To us, it was pretty cool, and it was cool that we learned, within, months of growing up there. We grew up near this playground, and there was a mulberry tree there, climbing the mulberry tree, picking the mulberries, tasting them, and then throwing them at your friends because they inevitably stained their shirts and got their mothers angry at them, or throwing them at horse carriages, loquat trees, all these things that were just so tropical and esoteric and strange and wonderful and wondrous.
I'm going to interrupt you to start this first demo because you sort of want to know what you're tasting there. One of the exotic things that we encountered when we came to Charleston was Henry's Restaurant. And I don't know whether you know Charleston well enough, but
remember Henry's?
Until relatively recently, there weren't many restaurants in Charleston. It just wasn't a restaurant town. It was more of a home cooking town. That's the aspect of Charleston that we've tried to capture in the new book. But Henry's was iconic in the whole 20th century. It started in, I believe, the late 20s or early 30s. It was modeled on New Orleans restaurants. It was a brasserie. It had a tiled floor, waiters in white jackets, and it had steaks, and it had a range of really cool fish dishes as well. But the first impression of this restaurant, and it's one that we got, we went to Henry's a few times before it changed hands and became something different with the same name. Confusingly enough, there's still a Henry's in the same location, but it is no Henry's.
There's little resemblance to the one with waiters in white jackets.
So the first impression, and it's pictured in the book, is something that was put down on the table if you ordered dinner. It was originally just a bar with food that sort of gradually crept into the menu, and then it became a full-fledged restaurant. But if you ordered dinner, you'd get this oval stainless steel dish with ice, and then crudité on it, carrot sticks, celery sticks, radishes, green olives, and a little bowl of this horseradish-scented cheese, basically a beer cheese. And that's what you have in front of you. This is being transported back to 1932 because we were able, through our extensive interviews with various characters around town, we just lucked into meeting the grandson of the founder of Henry's. And he, after some time, many interviews, he was able to put his finger on an old typewritten copy of the recipe for that cheese dip. And it's a doozy. And it was scaled for, a vat. And so in our development process, we had to, dumb it down to, what does it make? Enough for 6 to 8 people. But the original recipe...
well, just to give you a sense of the scale of the recipe, it called for 1 bottle of red wine,
1 bottle of beer, and 1 bottle of yellow food coloring, which we omitted. We took some creative license there. Horseradish, Lee and Perrins, which of course means Worcestershire, and a hot sauce. They reference Tabasco, dry mustard, garlic cloves, and I didn't remember this until I saw it now. And it's just there's nothing to demonstrate. It's all those ingredients that you see before you buzzed up in a Cuisinart. But I didn't realize until today that we, in the testing process, omitted the red wine, because when you scale it down appropriately to this thing, it came out to like a 1/4 teaspoon. And Ted and our editor thought that it was like a shame to require people to purchase a bottle of red wine just for that 1/4 teaspoon. I happen to think that it's a shame for you all to force us to omit the red wine just because you don't happen to have a bottle of red wine on hand.
But that's a really good point. In the production of a cookbook, you're often forced with these decisions. Do you be cool and say put a splash of red wine in if you got it, or do you omit it and double the beer?
And we should have.
What we did was double the beer, and Matt's saying that we did it wrong.
What I did for you tonight is I tasted it, I recognized the omission, and I put in the splash of red wine, and I think it actually served a really important function, which was just bringing this sort of fruity, strange quality to it.
But it's pretty intense, right? I mean, it's like pimento cheese on turbo,
Well, the horseradish element is sort of defining.
Like mustard, almost wasabi, wow, that's like going up into my sinuses and out my ears.
All right, so I'm going to dump, stir.
But the other thing is that this is and the recipe, so you may have already read this, but this was a cheese spread that sort of took on a life of its own because of travel writers who would come to Charleston and
lemon juice,
fresh garlic, lemon juice.
I think it said catsup in the original.
Ketchup.
We're substituting ketchup.
It's kind of everything but the kitchen sink here.
Worcestershire.
This
sort of like clovey, anchovy sort of thing going on. The horseradish. Crystal hot sauce. If you love Tabasco, you'll probably adore Crystal hot sauce. Yingling, I hear. David.
Yingling lager.
Sam Adams is a good substitute. And powdered dry mustard. And, for the next month and a half while we're on tour, this is going to be our go-to, sample when we do, more modest, signings and stuff. It's always nice to have something that people can eat to connect with your book, and this is, damn easy.
Choppers. super easy, a no-cook. No-cook thing. Great for doing on, when you demonstrate on television, this is called a dump, dump, stir. The problem on television is it makes this terrible noise.
But if you want to scooch it down with the spatula, here you go. Of course, it's not alcohol-free, which I guess technically makes it an adult product. But it's such a minor amount. I would happily serve my 3-year-old this cheese spread if he didn't hate spicy foods.
So that's a classic. It's sort of, there are a few types of recipes in the new book, the Lee Brothers Charleston Kitchen, which I feel is really the book we grew up to write. Some of you may be familiar with our first book, which is a very sort of encyclopedic tome of more than 200 recipes, 600 pages, that was all trying to get across the point that we'd just come off a time when we were budding travel journalists, and we traveled a bunch around the South and had written for the New York Times and other places, and we wanted to get across the point in the first book that you can't just talk about Southern food. You really have to get, are you talking about the Appalachian South? Are you talking about the Panhandle of Florida? Are you talking about, the Low Country? Or are you talking about Colombia? Because we eat differently from place to place, and the cool thing about the South is you can taste it as you travel. So the second book was more like a weeknight interpretation of Southern cuisine using simple, fresh ingredients. And the reason for that was we'd gone on tour for a long time, because the first book sort of didn't catch on for a while, and then it did, and then we got to tour with that book for almost 2 years, and everyone would say, I love the book, I love the stories, but gosh, does anyone in the South cook anything that takes less than 4.5 hours? So that was the genesis of the second book. But with this book, we finally got to really tell the stories of places we grew up near, and people we grew up with, and it's really, I think it's the most fun book we've written. And the Henry's cheese spread is sort of one of a sort of class of recipes in the book. It gives tribute to a Charleston institution.